If you have a fear of hospitals, it's about to get a whole lot worse. Christopher Duntsch was a neurosurgeon responsible for botching 33 of his 38 surgeries that resulted in the death of 2 patients. Several of his patients were left paralyzed, catastrophically injured, and never fully recovered. His nickname was Dr. Death. He gained a terrible reputation for operating on people while drunk, was a cocaine addict, and had a major god complex. Duntsch wanted to become a pro football player but wasn't good enough to play as a starter. He studied at university for 15 years and earned his medical degree from the University of Tennessee. His credentials were questionable as he barely passed his exams and was a mediocre student at most. He faked his way through residency training and hyped himself up as a revolutionary surgeon who could change the world. Duntsch was part of a startup company called degenerate, a biopharmaceutical company focused on regenerative therapies for degenerative spine diseases. Duntsch claimed to be the brains behind the company but lacked the skills and knowledge to back it up. After padding up his resume as a top-tier surgeon, he secured a job at Baylor Regional Medical Center in Dallas. In 2011, he started performing surgeries with hopes of becoming one of the best surgeons in the world. That didn't happen. On paper, Duntsch was a spine specialist who founded a biotech company with 5 years of residency experience. In actuality, he was underqualified and used false confidence to secure a job. Basically, he faked it till he made it. In fall of 2011, a patient named Kenneth Fennell required back surgery after suffering from chronic pain. Instead of providing relief, Duntsch operated on the wrong area of his spine and severed a nerve during the procedure. The operation left Fennell permanently disabled and took months of rehabilitation to learn how to walk. Around this time, Duntsch became romantically involved with one of his assistant nurses. Mind you that at the time he was in a relationship with the stripper who was about to give birth to one of his children. He has a history of not making good decisions in and outside of work. He was known to go on cocaine benders while drinking himself into oblivion, leading him to be unavailable for days, which made things difficult for patients who required emergency surgery. Not too long after his first surgery, he operated on Lee Passmore to help relieve lower back pain. Another surgeon present during the operation testified that Duntsch pulled out a spinal ligament, which didn't need to be done during this type of surgery. He also left surgical equipment in Lee's spine that is still there to this day. The surgery left Lee worse off than before, having to deal with excruciating back pain and permanent walking difficulties. In early 2012, Duntsch operated on his lifelong best friend Jerry Summers, who required neck surgery after a car accident. During the procedure, Duntsch severed his vertebral artery, which caused massive internal bleeding. He stopped the bleeding by using excessive amounts of anticoagulant gel, but it backfired because Jerry's spinal cord was constricted. Not only that, Duntsch removed so much bone from Jerry's spine that his head was no longer secured onto his body. Because of this, Jerry woke up paralyzed from the neck down and later died in 2021 from complications from the surgery. It was later revealed that the night before the surgery, Duntsch had gone on a cocaine bender with Summers. That's so crazy. He trusted his lifelong best friend to operate on his neck after a night of doing hella cocaine. Insane. His erratic behavior got so bad that the medical board wanted to drug test him and run a psychological evaluation. He passed the psych evaluation but refused to be drug tested. They even offered him a bonus to piss in the cup, but he knew he would fail. Even after this incident, Duntsch was still allowed to operate. In July of 2012, Duntsch operated on school librarian Kelly Martin after she injured her back falling off a ladder. It was a routine spinal decompression procedure that a rookie surgeon could complete. During the operation, he cut too far near her spine and cut a major blood vessel that resulted in massive blood loss. The egotistical surgeon refused to admit he made a mistake and ignored the problem. Kelly woke up from surgery in terrible condition and was taken into the ICU. For 3 hours, hospital staff were trying to reverse the damage while Duntsch refused to help because he wouldn't acknowledge his mistake. Kelly Martin died on the operating table from a surgery that was supposed to be simple and routine. After this incident, Duntsch resigned and was transferred to another hospital. He started working at Dallas Medical Center, where he continued his reign of terror. Floella Brown was scheduled for a cervical spine surgery, and during the operation, he slashed 2 vital arteries, causing massive blood loss. He improperly stopped the bleeding by applying pressure on the blood vessels that supplied oxygen to Floella's brain. He brushed off his mistake, not realizing the fatal chain of events that would occur because of his carelessness. Floella awoke from surgery in stable condition, even talking with family who came to visit. At 5 o'clock the next morning, she began convulsing and lost consciousness. Hospital staff tried to get a hold of Duntsch, who was presumably on a bender and was in no condition to go into surgery. He later arrived at the hospital hungover, filthy, and wearing the same scrubs from the past several days. Hospital staff told Duntsch what had happened, but he responded with little to no concern. As a matter of fact, he started operating on another patient named Mary Efford while Floella was dying in the other room. She required lumbar spinal surgery to relieve her lower back pain. Unfortunately for Mary, the surgeon conducting the operation was drunk, reckless, and unqualified to be a medical doctor. In the operating room, Duntsch argued with hospital staff about what to do with Floella. He suggested a highly advanced operation called the craniotomy, which involves drilling a hole into the brain to relieve pressure. The medical board board said no, so he prevented them from sending Floella to another hospital that could save her life. Meanwhile in the OR, Duntsch operated on the wrong side of Mary's spine and severed a nerve root, which caused massive blood loss. He improperly inserted screws into muscle tissue instead of bone, left surgical hardware in Mary's body, and failed to remove the targeted discs. She awoke from surgery in massive pain, paralyzed, and in terrible condition. At the same time, Floella Brown died from her injuries, and Dallas Medical Center suspended Duntsch from operating. Dr. Robert Henderson was called in to repair Mary's back, and what he found shocked him to the core. He recorded the surgery because he didn't think anyone would believe what Duntsch had done to Mary. He accused Duntsch of being an imposter and called the University of Tennessee to make sure he actually was a trained medical doctor. It was that bad. What's even more crazy is that after these two incidences, Duntsch was still offered 2 surgical positions at other hospitals. Immediately after being transferred, he operated on Jeff Cheney, Philip Mayfield, Jacqueline Troy, and Marshall Tex Muse, and each of these surgeries went terribly wrong. Cheney lost sensation on the right side of his body, had permanent neurological damage, and became mentally disabled after Duntsch damaged his spinal cord during surgery. Mayfield was partially paralyzed from the neck down and required years of rehabilitation to learn how to walk with a cane. During surgery, Duntsch had recklessly drilled into his spinal cord that ultimately led to his death in 2021. Jacqueline Troy awoke from surgery unable to speak after Duntsch mistook her esophagus for a tumor. She had permanent damage to her vocal cords and could only whisper, or else she could get a fatal infection. The night before his surgery, Marshall Tex Muse confronted Duntsch by asking him about Kelly Martin after reading about her death online. Duntsch responded by cursing at Marshall over the phone and claimed her death was caused by an allergic reaction to anesthetic. Reluctantly, Tex went through with the surgery and awoke with excruciating pain. This was because Duntsch had left surgical equipment near his spine and completely botched the surgery. He then overprescribed Tex with enough drugs to kill a horse, which later spiraled into an opiate addiction. He lost his wife and job as a result of the painkiller addiction. Duntsch's final surgery took place in June of 2013 after Jeff Glidewell required cervical fusion to alleviate chronic neck pain. During the operation, Duntsch mistook neck muscle for a tumor, severed a vocal cord, sliced an artery, cut into his esophagus, and left a surgical sponge inside his neck before sewing him closed. Afterwards, Glidewell spent 4 days in the ICU, endured months of rehabilitation, and had permanent nerve damage to his left arm. Dr. Randall Kirby described Duntsch's operation as the work of a crazed maniac. This resulted in the medical board finally revoking Duntsch's medical license and banning him from ever performing surgeries. In July of 2015, Duntsch was arrested and charged with 1 count of injury to an elderly person and 5 counts of assault. The prosecutors focused on Mary Effort's case and highlighted a pattern of reckless behavior to prove he intentionally hurt his patients. Several key testimonies came from co-workers, ex-girlfriends, and hospital staff, which exposed Duntsch for being a degenerate drug addict that had a complete disregard for human life. It wasn't uncommon for Duntsch to drink vodka and orange juice to start off the day, and he frequently used drugs before working with patients. Prosecutors also discovered an email that Duntsch had sent where he rambled about becoming a cold-blooded killer. This case exposed the systemic failures of the medical board who allowed a criminal like Duntsch to operate with immunity for such a long time. The hospitals, peer reviews, the state boards, and psychological exams each failed to prevent patients from getting hurt. They ignored the complaints and swept his mistakes under the rug to protect their own interests. Not all of them, but several doctors failed to speak out in fear of being blacklisted from the MD community. Christopher Duntsch is a sociopath that abused his position of power to do as he pleased without any consequences. He was a terrible surgeon with a god complex that hurt dozens of patients because the system he was a part of prioritized profit over justice. In February of 2017, Duntsch was sentenced to life in prison and became the first doctor in the United States to be arrested for criminal negligence. Harold Frederick Shipman, aka the Angel of Death, was a family doctor responsible for killing over 250 of his patients. His appearance was that of a trustworthy doctor, when in reality he was one of the deadliest serial killers in modern history. Unlike most serial killers, Fred was an upstanding citizen that excelled in high society. He was described as well-mannered, quiet, and friendly. Fred was the perfect predator. He was well trusted by his patients and had access to deadly substances. This dangerous combination resulted in the deaths of hundreds of people. His motivations are vague, but upon looking at his upbringing, we can determine how a serial killer was created. Harold Shipman grew up in Nottingham, England, to a working class family. He was the middle of 3 children with religious parents and had a relatively stable upbringing. The death of his mother at age 17 had a major psychological impact that forever changed the course of his life. She suffered from lung cancer and was administered a hot dose of morphine shortly before passing away. This traumatic event would become his modus operandi during his crime spree. Fred got married in 1966 and had 4 children. By 1970, 1970, he graduated from University of Leeds School of Medicine. He was training to become a general practitioner and completed his residency in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, up until 1974. 1 year later, he was caught forging prescriptions for pethidine, which spiraled into an opioid addiction. Fred was required to enter rehab and continued practicing as a family doctor. It was evident that he didn't have a problem with misusing pharmaceuticals. His primary drug of choice was diamorphine, which is pharmaceutical-grade heroin. This was the drug he used to kill his victims and cremate their bodies to erase any forensic evidence. He falsified death certificates to make it seem like his patients died of natural causes. His primary targets were women in their 70s or 80s that seemed like they were gonna die soon. He preferred patients who suffered from underlying health conditions, lived alone, and were socially isolated. Fred also targeted patients who were socially active, relatively healthy, and in mobile condition. This would later raise suspicion amongst other physicians who noticed his patients had a higher death rate than usual. In March of 1998, after decades of killing hundreds of patients, Dr. Linda Reynolds reported to the coroner's office for an unusually high death rate amongst elderly patients. Coroner John Pollard triggered a police investigation that went nowhere because police lacked the evidence to make an arrest. 3 more women died because police failed to thoroughly investigate Fred's killing spree. Not too long after, in June that same year, former Mayor Kathleen Grundy died after a home visit from Fred. Before killing Kathleen, he forged her will by awarding himself £386,000. Her daughter, Angela Woodruff, told investigators the will was a fake, and they started looking into Fred's involvement. The autopsy report found deadly amounts of diamorphine in her system, but she wasn't diagnosed with any illnesses that required such medication. This investigation unloaded a can of worms that involved hundreds of victims in the Hyde Greater Manchester area. Between 1974 and 1998, Fred had gained a reputation for being a caring doctor, but his patients never lasted long. Elderly women nicknamed him Dr. Death because once he became your doctor, it was only a matter of time before death was at your doorstep. The British doctor was loved by his patients, as he would go above and beyond to comfort them. He made home visits, chatted with patients, and sometimes helped them with chores around the house. Under this guise, he was able to kill his victims, falsify death certificates, and burn the bodies. His first confirmed victim was Ava Lyons, a 71-year-old terminally ill cancer patient who was injected with a lethal dose of diamorphine. Fred sat with her unsuspecting husband while they watched her die from an overdose. This case was one of 15 murders used by prosecutors to establish Fred's behavior as an angel of death. They compared statistics between other doctors who dealt with elderly patients and noticed a disproportionate amount of deaths. Fred once had 3 patients die in one day, and several deaths in a span of a few days. Investigators suspect he started his killing spree as early as 1971 during his residency training in West Yorkshire. Most of his victims were labeled as the invisible majority because they were isolated elderly women dependent on Fred's care. Angela Woodruff's testimony played the most crucial role in the trial because she discovered her mother's forged will and was the one who urged police to investigate. Relatives of the 15 victims testified that their loved ones were socially active and healthy, but died suddenly after meeting with Fred. They noted that Fred pressured them into quick cremations and wasn't being clear on how they died. On January 31st, 2000, Harold Frederick Shipman was sentenced to life in prison for murdering 15 of his patients and forging the will of Angela Woodruff's mother. While incarcerated, a man named Noel Fleming shared a cell with Fred and was terrified of him. He heard about the 200+ body count and tried to hang himself out of fear of being next. Fred saved his life and they became good friends up until his died in 2004. Fred wanted to die so his wife would receive life insurance benefits and he could escape his punishment. To this day, there is still debate as to why he killed his patients. Here are 3 possible motives. 1. He was a drug addict who replaced his drug habit with a killing spree. 2. He was reliving his childhood trauma of losing his mother via lethal injection and inflicting that same fate onto his victims. Or 3. He had a god complex and enjoyed choosing who dies and who lives. Either way, a seemingly ordinary doctor, well respected within his community, was able to kill over 200 people throughout a span of 27 years without being caught. To this day, Harold Shipman remains one of the deadliest serial killers in modern history. In 2024, a German doctor named Johannes M was arrested for going on a killing spree that claimed the lives of 15 people. The trial is still ongoing, so everything I'm gonna say is purely allegations from the prosecution team. Johannes' upbringing remains a mystery because of Germany's privacy laws regarding suspects in custody. He was born in the Frankfurt area of Germany and studied medicine to become a palliative care doctor. During his time at the Goethe University Frankfurt, Johannes wrote a medical dissertation paper titled Homicides in Frankfurt, an overview from 1945 1995 to 2008. He mainly focused on the killing of patients and how the crime scenes were covered up. It's like he was learning how to get away with murder and using this research paper as an excuse. After graduating, he practiced medicine at clinics in the states of Hesse and North Rhine-Westphalia before moving to Berlin in 2021. Around this time, he worked for a palliative care team in Tempelhof and a nursing service in Kreuzberg. Johannes made several home visits for various patients who were terminally ill. He was described as unnaturally calm, almost void of emotion, but at the same time being very compassionate with patients. Johannes was well respected and highly competent within the palliative care department. He was a reliable doctor that went above and beyond in terms of healthcare. In September of 2021, Johannes started his crime spree after visiting a patient at their home with a predetermined plan to take them out. He administered a cocktail of sedatives and muscle relaxers to induce respiratory failure. Since they were terminally ill, it didn't raise suspicion when they passed away. Between 2021 and 2024, Johannes took the lives of 15 patients while flying under the radar. Not only that, he set fire to 5 of the victims' houses in order to cover up his tracks. His colleagues within the palliative care system noticed an alarming amount of deaths and house fires centered around his patients. He was arrested in August of 2024 under the suspicion of 4 murders, then they charged him with 9, then 15, so they were finding bodies as they did more investigating. It's 100% possible that as this case goes on, there's going to be more victims, more uncovered evidence, and more things we didn't know. The victims range from 25 to 94, both men and women. Although the victims were terminally ill, other physicians concluded they still had plenty of time to live. The trial started in July of 2025, with prosecutors claiming to have over 150 key witnesses, forensic evidence, toxicology reports, and ongoing fire investigations. At this time, the motives are still vague. Some people say he was bloodthirsty, had a god complex, or simply they were mercy killings. If you want a part 2 to this video, be sure to like and subscribe and write down your comments down below. If you have a fear of hospitals, I'm sorry I made your fear worse, but these cases are interesting, and thank you for watching.